The average lifespan for Americans is going up again after several years of decline during the pandemic. How can we all take steps to living longer, and what role do policymakers have in making this happen?
The second rule is socialize. Human interaction is what human beings are made for. We're social animals and we have to interact. That's key to a long and healthy life.
Our guest is Dr. Zeke Emanuel, and his new book is titled Eat Your Ice Cream: 6 Simple Rules for a Long and Healthy Life.
The fact is, we're social beings. We are not the strongest animal in the world. We're not the fastest animal in the world. We are powerful because we can collaborate with people. That's the whole point of the neocortex, the new part of the brain, is to navigate social interactions and to work with other people. And that's really, really important. And one of our problems is we're going in the wrong direction. Loneliness is dramatically increasing. Eating alone is dramatically increasing. But we know from things like the Harvard Adult Development Study, the longest running study over 80 years, following people, those people who live the longest, have the fewest health problems, and are the happiest, are people who have close friends and interact regularly with close friends.
This is Conversations on Healthcare.
Well, Dr. Emanuel, welcome back to Conversations on Healthcare.
It's my great pleasure to be here.
All right, let's get to the serious question. What's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Well, at a book party, an ice cream maker in Washington made me Lebna honey with candied pistachio. Oof. Let me tell you, heaven on earth.
There you go.
Oh, that's okay. That's great. Let's not wait also to ask you, what do you believe are the 6 simple rules for a long and healthy life?
Well, as I say in my book, the first rule is don't be a schmuck. Don't take unnecessary, unreasonable, high risks. The second rule is socialize. Human interaction is what human beings are made for. We're social animals and we have to interact. That's key to a long and healthy life. Third rule, keep mentally sharp and do things that are going to keep your mind active. Third, eat well. Fourth, exercise. Do the 3 different kinds of exercise. That's 5th. And 6th is sleep. And all of them are important. The one I leave out that lots of people ask me about is stress. And as I like to say, if you do the 6 things, stress takes care of itself. Reducing your stress is a byproduct of actually doing these things. And every book or recommendation you look up about reducing stress, they say, exercise, talk to people. It's the 6 key simple rules of wellness.
Well, in the chapter on ice cream, you talk about GLP-1s, but you also say you're an advocate for personal willpower when it comes to trying to lose weight. And we don't often hear so much about that these days, but let's start with the long-term concerns that you have with GLP-1s.
Well, actually, I'm a big advocate of GLP-1s. I think they're a good thing. I think they're amazing drugs, one of the real 5 big breakthroughs since the start of this century. But you can't have a society where everyone's eating terribly, getting obese, and then treating them with GLP-1s. We have a food ecosystem that encourages people to eat unhealthily, ultra-processed foods, high in sugar, high in salt, high in carbohydrates, and we need to change that. Yes, willpower is going to be necessary, but you also have to make it so it's pleasurable. No one can expend their willpower every day if through self-denial or some other way to try to get healthy. That's just not sustainable. Wellness is something you're going to have to do for decades and decades and decades. So you have to fit it into your life, make it a habit, and make it pleasurable, something you actually look forward to. And with food, it's easy. Looking forward to healthy food, that's pretty easy because healthy food tastes great and you can eat it with other people and socialize. So that's the approach I think we have to take. And, from a government standpoint and a policy standpoint, we have to educate people about eating well. And we also have to reduce the cost of healthy food because what we're doing now is supplementing the cost of unhealthy, ultra-processed foods. That's a really stupid policy.
Well, you have some really enjoyable sections in the book about your parents and their social connection habits. And you write that social connection matters more than diet. Margaret, I think we've certainly been talking about Robert Putnam and his whole thing about social capital being developed when people start not bowling alone, but bowling back together in groups is so important. What's been the feedback to the advice you're giving here? Are people surprised?
I think people are surprised. So Bob Putnam was actually a professor of mine when I was a graduate student at Harvard, these many years ago. I'm embarrassed to say how many years ago. Brilliant insights of his. I mean, it's entered the vernacular, right? Bowling alone. Right. The fact is, we're social beings. We are not the strongest animal in the world. We're not the fastest animal in the world. We are powerful because we can collaborate with people. That's the whole point of the neocortex, the new part of the brain, is to navigate social interactions and to work with other people. And that's really, really important. And one of our problems is we're going in the wrong direction. Loneliness is dramatically increasing. Eating alone is dramatically increasing. But we know from things like the Harvard Adult Development Study, the longest running study over 80 years, following people, those people who live the longest, have the fewest health problems, and are the happiest, are people who have close friends and interact regularly with close friends. And when you look at studies throughout the world, whether it's China, Australia, Sweden, the United States, Taiwan, you have overwhelming data that when people interact regularly as they age, they actually live longer. They have a reduced mortality risk of between 22 and 30 or 35%. That's dramatic. That's better than exercise, better than eating well. So that's really, really an important lesson for us all.
It's a good lesson, but I wonder how, if you're listening and you're lonely, what are the steps to make you unlonely? I mean, it's hard, right? You've already been isolated. Is there sort of a playbook of how people get engaged? We worry about that, I think, in the work that we do. We serve underserved populations, and too often people can be isolated from each other. But what are any simple steps that somebody could take?
So there are two groups that you should keep in mind. One are people who are close friends or related to you, family or friends. Pick up the phone and talk to them. It's really that simple. You know them. You can just ask, how are you doing? What did you do for the weekend? How are the holidays? How are your kids, etc. The other are what are called weak social interactions. People you might not know, you might have some overlap. And it turns out that if you force yourself to interact with those people, even if you're an introvert, you actually are happier. And by the way, you will learn more social skills. So there's a professor from University of Chicago, Nick Epley, who did these studies of commuters into Chicago. And he went, and before they got on the train or the bus, he said, all right, on this week, you're going to have to talk to at least one person on the commute. And he did a lot of personality assessments before. And then the next week, don't make an effort to talk. And it turns out when you make an effort to talk and you talk to just one person, it makes your day. It makes you happier. You feel better. You have more energy at the end of the day because we are social beings. And when we interact with people, it changes our brain physiology and it changes our body physiology a lot. And this is true for introverts as well as for extroverts. So just try that. Now, a lot of people say, well, the other person might not like it. Of course it's true. All of us had the circumstance. I get on the plane, I talk to the person next to me. Why are you flying to Chicago? Well, they give you a monosyllabic response or they don't even engage. That happens. What have you lost? Nothing.
Nothing.
Okay?
Right.
If they talk, you might learn something about them. You might enjoy that conversation. They might ask you something about yourself. And I think those techniques, we have to remember, we're not so fragile that if someone rejects a conversation, we're going to crumple. Mm-hmm. Happens all the time. Right. And my dad used to tell me, they're probably having a bad day. Maybe someone's sick in their family. Maybe a business deal's gone bad. Maybe they had a car accident. You don't know, okay? Just cut them some slack. And remember, You're not that fragile. And there's another person. And I have done this repeatedly. My research assistants do this. I had a research assistant who went to a restaurant eating at the bar. He says, I'm not living the life that's in the book. I've just helped research. So he starts talking to the bartender. Turns out, she is working in trying to get a master's in healthcare administration. They have a long conversation about the healthcare system. And then a guy down the bar says, oh, I recognize you. You were in my film class in college, and you talked a lot. And then he said he spent half an hour or 40 minutes talking to people. He left the dinner feeling great.
That's great. Wait, I thought the bartender's job was to talk to the people at the bar, but maybe I missed something. But Zeke, the book, you're so positive in your comments about what we can do towards wellness, but you also list some lifestyle choices that you consider distinctly anti-wellness, and you put social media in that bucket. Total blackout on social media, not likely to happen across the population. But what's the gradation there? Is it time? Is it type of social media? Is it what it's replacing? What's your thoughts there? What's the best advice for people?
I think you're 100% right that there is a huge opportunity cost. Every minute you spend on social media is a minute you're not spending doing something much more meaningful, especially if what you're doing is doom scrolling or just looking at pictures on Instagram or whatever. Can be a role for media and the cell phone, but I think it's much more limited than it's come to occupy in our life. They have figured out how to make it addictive to us, just like all the other addictive things, whether it's cigarettes or gambling. And that's a bad thing. So my own prescription is, first of all, I don't get on social. I don't actually scroll and look at things. I use it for communication where it's appropriate. And I try to make blackout days. So at meals, phone is nowhere to be seen. And as I point out in the book, unless you're trying to settle a bet. I try to have an electronics-free Sabbath one day a week where I'm not looking at it. I'm in my third year of making that New Year's pledge because I'm getting better, but I'm still not 100%. And I think that's an important thing. Just go a whole day. I will tell you, for the last 2 years, I've prohibited the cell phone in my class. I prohibited computers where you could surf the internet and tablets. Students initially little prickly about it, and then they come to like it. And the intensity that they're focused on what's happening in the classroom rather than shopping or email or the news or whatever they're looking at is way better. My evaluations, and I've done nothing different, haven't changed my teaching style one iota, not different. They actually appreciate it. And I have a professor who teaches at another university who saw my op-ed on getting rid of cell phones and stuff from classrooms, put it to a vote in her classroom. And she said, kids said we would prefer not to have social media. I think there's a bit of FOMO, if right. They're not on social media, they're wondering what everyone else is learning or doing, and if everyone's got it prohibited, then it's fine for them. And by the way, we're all looking at the Australia experiment, and we're going to see what difference it makes for kids.
For children coming up.
Mental health.
I think we're seeing in our own home communities here, elementary schools who are banning it and doing it. And that, I think it's a great...
Bell to bell, no cell phones. I'm a big advocate of that. Two, trying to get it passed in Pennsylvania, where I am. And that the educational attainment of kids who are not doing that well rises. The amount of bullying in school declines. The amount of social interaction increases. There doesn't seem to be any negative by banning cell phones.
Hey, what do you mean? If I don't have my cell phone, what's AI going to tell me? I can't talk to AI. But look, speaking of news, you note that extending life is a big topic right now. Seeing a lot of articles and books out. And you're right, there's really this tsunami of information out there, and you criticize advocates who treat long life as a gold medal. Tell us more about why they're getting it wrong.
There's a headline from in a newspaper. Scientists say science will allow us to live 150 to 200 years. Turns out that headline's from 1909 in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. We have been wanting to live longer, longer, longer. That is not a goal. The goal is, what are you going to do with that extra time? What are you going to do with that life? And focusing only on living more years rather than on what are you going to fill those years with is the mistake. As I say in the book, it's like putting the means as the end of life. You know, Brian Johnson, this famous influencer who, by the way, is a perfectly nice guy. I've met him, very nice guy. You know, I asked him, I said, why do you want to live to 150, 200 years? Silence. He had no response. Then he looks to the side and he says, you know, I'm the most monitored person in the world. Who cares? What are you doing with that time is the real question. And what bothers me about this focus on living longer, living longer, living longer is the fact that that's not the goal. The goal is, what do you want to live for? How are you going to contribute? And here, you know, I think Ben Franklin is really the person. He used to think, how are you going to be useful? And by useful, he didn't mean, you know, in some narrow sense. He said, how are you going to improve the world because you've passed through it? And, you know, he was constantly inventing things. We know him for inventing the bifocals, but he invented the lightning rod, swim fins, lots and lots. He's still one of the top 5 inventors of all time. He has at least 10 different inventions.
Right.
And he never patented one of them. His goal, I'm putting them out there. People will improve their lives, and that's enough for me.
Well, we have had on the program.
Not Ben Franklin.
Not Ben Franklin. Wish I could have.
Damn, I would have
a noted researcher from University of Illinois, Jay Olshansky. And Jay made headlines, as you know, when there was data presented that humans actually are approaching a biologically based limit to life. So whether you want to or not, he's thinking, no, there is a limit. I think it's fair to say that there's a whole industry, particularly embraced by the highly affluent and highly driven, to engage in multiple different interventions to try and extend life. But just on the kind of science basis, you know, philosophy, but on this side, the science, do you think he's right? Do you think that there really is a sort of a preconditioned kind of lifespan for us humans here?
Yeah, I think Jay has produced a lot of very good data about the decreasing, what he shows is the decreasing increase in lifespan, basically, and that we're butting up against the limit of, you know, whatever it is, 110, 120 years. And, you know, you can see it if you see people who are in their 90s, and certainly in centenarians. They're not up around and dancing. They're not traveling by and large. Are there exceptions? Absolutely. But if you meet a lot of them, you know, their memory is a little fading. They're usually sitting in chairs and shuffling between places. And that's what happens because cells die in the body, neural connections die in the body. And this idea that there's going to be universal regeneration of all our cells and body organs just doesn't seem to be the case. Certainly
that's the IT billionaires talking.
Mm-hmm.
What?
That's the IT billionaires all talking.
Yes, that's what they want. That's what they think is going to happen. And, you know, you might ask them, why? You know, one of the things we end up learning about the IT billionaires is they tend to stop being innovative, you know, before they're 50, which is common. Right? It's not what Einstein said, you know, if you haven't made your contribution by 30, you're not going to. That's wrong. That happened only in one brief episode of the development of quantum mechanics in the 30s. Mostly innovations and breakthroughs and the Nobel Prize kind of breakthroughs happen in the late 30s, early 40s, up until 50. But after that, you know, our creativity just tends to decline. There's a lot of data about that. And there's a reason, you know, our connections aren't the same. Similarly, our bodies begin to decline. Everyone who's gotten past 50 and 60 realizes that, you know, their bodies are going to decline. Maybe it'll be a different rate. They'll go not to 75, they'll go to 80 or 82, but then it's inevitable. And I think fighting against it as if, you're going to reverse evolution, I think is probably a bad mistake. It's going to be a certain waste of time. But I think these billionaires think, what's the world going to be without me? We're going to be fine.
We'll be okay.
Basically.
Okay. Margaret, I think we're both asked the same question. When are we going to retire? And I say, when it becomes work. That
is a great answer. I love that.
But the retirement industry may have a bone to pick with you because you write that retirement leads to more rapid cognitive decline for people. Your advice is to never retire, but are there ways to navigate retirement without such a decline?
Well, I do say in the book, we're probably all going to have to retire. And the answer is yes. Again, you can't retire and plan to go, and sit on the beach and sip pina coladas, and that'll be great. That is actually a recipe for a bad retirement. You have to figure out what you're going to fill your time with. We know that when you stop working, right, cognitive decline actually increases. There's great study out of RAND looking at different countries that have different ages of retirement, and those countries that have the earlier age of retirement, the cognitive decline happens faster. Why is that? Well, there's socialization at work. There are challenges at work. There's keeping a schedule at work. There's lots of things that work provides. So when you're going to retire, you have to figure out, what are you going to do? Where are you going to volunteer? What new hobbies are you going to take up to keep the mind cognitively engaged and growing and not regressing? Avoiding those passive, activities like substituting watching TV for the hours you spent working. All of those are going to be really, really important to do, and whether you take up going to book clubs or volunteering at a food bank or, a library or teaching kids in school, being a tutor, all of those are things that can be meaningful and put on a schedule. You don't have to do them 40 hours a week. You can do them less, but they keep you engaged longer. And I think that's critically important. The other critically important element is eating well so that you're not eating ultra-processed foods, because we know ultra-processed foods actually make the cognitive decline more rapid. Exercise. These are all things that can add to a long and healthy life.
Well, Zeke, I think most of our listeners know that you have held a number of very important roles in the federal government. And as we look at this issue of wellness and longevity, seems to me that the policymakers have the potential to really make some positive impact, and also probably have a lot of concerns about what does it mean as people live longer, healthy lives. How do you think our leaders are doing at both emphasizing the wellness into the later years and also just supporting the longest, fullest life people can have?
Well, I think we're not doing a great job. We are. I will say, I think the new food guidelines that have been released, there are some positives and there are some negatives. I think net the positives exceed the negatives in this case. The emphasis on not eating as much ultra-processed foods, cooking at home, decreasing your sugar intake, decreasing your salt intake, all positive, increasing your fruits and vegetables, nuts, for example. The negatives are this overwhelming emphasis on eating more beef, which seems like, and beef tallow.
Beef tallow, my favorite.
Lots of data that's not a good idea, that the saturated fats, but also lots of other things is not healthy and leads to premature mortality. We already in this country eat 12 ounces per person per day of meat. Way too much. And in my book, I suggest going down to something closer to 6 ounces a week rather than 12 ounces a day. That's going in the right direction. I would say the second problem with the government is, if you really want people to eat well, you have to change the food supply, and you have to change the food production ecosystem away from ultra-processed foods. And, you have all these manufacturers making bad food, packaged cakes, packaged cookies, packaged pizzas, frozen burritos or whatever, and you have to make that more expensive. So people will eat less of them and shift over to eating healthy things, whether it's fruits and vegetables or nuts or beans. And we haven't taken that step. The other step is, as you point out, there is a big fiscal question. If people are living longer, healthier lives, what are we going to do about Social Security, Medicare? Right. And to date, the government is not confronting that question and not confronting how we're going to make those programs sustainable. And the consequences, costs for seniors are going way up, and the poverty level of seniors, which has been going down, is beginning to creep up.
Speaking of the government, in the book and in a recent Washington Post op-ed, you address the vaccine controversy, and you write that the HHS Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has devised really an underhanded way to take away vaccines from Americans. Why do you see this happening?
I don't know why he's completely against vaccines, except to make money. But they are overwhelming one of the greatest health interventions. And one of the reasons I think he's there are two reasons I think he's hitting a nerve. One is the success of vaccines, right? Your parents and my parents would worry in the 1950s when summer would come and polio would spread, and maybe their kid would get polio and end up paralyzed or even worse on an iron lung. And they were paralyzed by that fear. And when the Salk vaccine and then the Sabin vaccines came out, they lined their kids up. They couldn't wait to get their kids a vaccine. And then we got vaccines against measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, tetanus, all sorts of threats to children's well-being. And that success, the fact that those diseases have virtually disappeared, meant people got a lot more why do we need the vaccines? These diseases aren't a threat to us. Well, they are a threat if you stop getting vaccines, and we've now seen that with measles. So I think that's one thing, this sort of the adverse consequence of the success of vaccines. The other problem, I think, is this problem of, the government shouldn't tell me what to do. And that's, frankly, been exacerbated by COVID and some of the bad response that the government had during COVID. And, all of us were trying to figure out the right thing to do during the pandemic. I think we've learned a lot from that pandemic. Hopefully it won't be forgotten. But I think this anti-authoritarianism, I'm an individual, don't tell me what to do, I think is permeated. And unfortunately, in vaccines, the critical factor is herd immunity. We all need to work together and to collaborate. And that, I'm going to do whatever I want. We see the consequence of that in the outbreaks of measles, and now we're having diphtheria go up and a lot of adverse health consequences. And the fact is, RFK Jr. is simply wrong about vaccines, but he is really working hard to undercut vaccines and to make them unavailable. He's not going to make them unavailable by government edict. He's going to make them unavailable because manufacturers who are already not making a lot of money from vaccines are suddenly going to say, this doesn't make fiscal sense. We're getting out of the vaccine business, or at least we're getting out of it in the United States. And that means everyone is going to suffer.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Emanuel, for joining us again on Conversations. The book is titled Eat Your Ice Cream, 6 Simple Rules for a Long and Healthy Life. The publisher is W.W. Norton. And thank you to our audience for being here. And remember to subscribe to our videos on YouTube, find us on Facebook and X, and please share your thoughts and your comments about this program. Take care and be well. This copyrighted program is produced by Conversations on Healthcare and cannot be reproduced or retransmitted in whole or in part without the express written consent from Community Health Center, Inc. The views expressed by guests are their own, and they do not necessarily reflect the opinion of Conversations on Healthcare or its affiliated entities.